Welcome back to another episode of the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner and Mudgear Hannibal Race Pro, Evan Preparis. I've got a guest with me on the line, none other than Mr. Obstacle Running Adventures himself, Mike Stefano. Mike, say hi.
Happy to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. We're doing another Special Forces episode talking about Hulu and Fox's TV show Special Forces. This is part 3. If you missed parts 1 and 2, don't worry about it. You'll still learn something on this. You can go back and listen to them if you want. If not, you can listen to this. If you haven't seen the show, not a problem. If you have seen the show, great. If you're watching the show as we cover stuff, also great. They are all good. We're going to share some good tips. We're not going to give out any spoilers, but we will talk about some of the general things that happens in the event. We're just not going to use specific names. And previously we had Bobby on, and Bobby has been MIA. He's been he hasn't been responding to my text recently. So no, we got Mike filling in as a good replacement here.
I will do my best.
Yeah. Before we get to this episode, though, a quick word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Yolked. Yolked does a recovery product made of fertilized egg yolk. It's like a powder. It tastes kind of like powdered cupcakes. It's kind of an interesting taste to it. But it's supposed to, clinical trials show 3 times the muscle growth. So good for recovery. Great tasting. Have you had it, Mike? Have you tried it at any of the Savage races? They've been at a couple this year.
So I actually had it during OCR America 2.
Oh, nice.
Like an extra one. You're like, try this. And you explained it to me, and I still tried it, and it was very cool.
Yeah, sometimes when you describe what it is, people are like, hard pass. But then you taste it, and much different opinion.
I thought it was great.
Cool. So we're going to jump right into it. Mike has been patiently waiting for me. I just came back I was speaking with my former Cub Scout troop about military and obstacle course racing and like life lessons and perseverance. And it ran way longer than I was expecting because the Cub Scout troop's based in my church and they're on Greek time. And if you know anything about Greek time, it's just like you're perpetually late for everything, which was also true today.
Perfectly fine. I'm running off of 2 hours sleep, so it's been a day of my own as well.
All right, we will jump into it. We're going to talk about the TV show. Want to talk a little bit about the ultra-OCR Man documentary, and then what Obstacle Running Adventures has going on, so you can head over and listen to them if you're looking for more content, because I know I've reduced the number of episodes I put out just down to 2 per month since I'm busy. But yeah, we're going to jump right into episode 7. Before we start talking about that, Mike, any kind of initial thoughts on just the show in general that you wanted to share before we start
So
a little deeper?
I usually don't watch a lot of TV. I play a lot of video games because it kind of keeps me entertained. But I watched episodes 8 through 10, like you told me, and just the fact that it started off with a "Do not attempt this at home," that that had my interest right off the bat. So it was pretty enjoyable. So I'm excited to get into it.
Nice. All right. So the first couple of things are the last couple of minutes of episode 7. So I'll just kind of start there. They had at one point one of the essentially the selectees was like, I'm going to stay back and run with the weaker person. And I've seen that a lot of times. It's typically people who are falling out of a run and they don't want to admit they're falling out. And they're like, I'm going to go back and just check on the last guy. So common practice among, officers or non-commissioned officers who are already hurting and want to take it a little bit easier, but don't want to admit that they're taking it easy. So I've seen that a lot. I thought it was funny to see it also on TV. Kind of another nuance.
No real tricks that, people haven't done before.
Yeah. Just kind of another little nuance of being in a small team. You have to be very self-reliant, right? Because if you're in a very small team, essentially no one's coming to help you. So a lot of the parts of Special Forces selection and training are really like focused on you and being self-reliant and figuring out a solution. A lot of times the quick reaction force may not be available for a while or may take a while to get to you or may not come at all. So you have to be very self-reliant and kind of think through contingency planning. And that's kind of one of the nuances of Special Forces.
Yeah.
Let's jump into episode 8 real quick. So, I think a lot of these people are athletes on the show, and one of the big differences I think between athletes and soldiers is, right, athletes are used to peaking for an event, and even obstacle course races, right? Like you build up, you taper, you peak, and then you go to an off season or you go to recovery mode and you repeat. versus soldiers and a lot of, especially in the selection courses, just have to go. Yeah, there's no there's no there's no peak recovery and then make sure I'm fully rested and recovered for the next one. So I think that's something that a lot of the athletes on the show had to face that was different, that they may not have been physically used to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because I mean, the recovery practices and nutrition practices, a lot of these selection and training programs they're just absolutely terrible. Like we're not there to teach you proper nutrition and proper recovery. We're there to show that you can persevere regardless of how terrible things get or regardless of how poorly you've been fueling. So
Yeah, apply that heat, apply that pressure, and see if you can get any diamonds or if people crumble.
yeah, yeah. What'd you think of the helicopter rope climb out of the water as an obstacle course racer?
I I love that. So, the rope climbs doable. Wet ropes are more difficult but doable. But doing that while dealing with a helicopter downdraft, I
Yeah,
cannot imagine. Also, I feel like someone needs to teach that the military dude how to leg lock. I think he was just showing off, just using all arms.
agreed. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, most of us leg lock. I mean, if you've been in the military at any obstacle course, leg lock is the preferred method, just like it is for obstacle course racing. And that is not realistic for military training. Again, just like the first episode, it's just too expensive. It's too expensive to fly a helicopter just to climb a rope. Like, why don't I just have you climb a rope tied to a pole? The downwash, while does make it harder, it's not worth the extra expenditure of dollars and fuel and pilot time, etc.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It
Yeah.
also made me think of an argument that I've heard on another podcast of what is cooler, a motorcycle or a helicopter? And I don't know how that's an argument because it's absolutely a helicopter.
Oh, that's an odd argument.
Yeah, right? I was surprised there was even a debate.
It just seems like very. It seems it's just very. They seem very different.
True, yeah, but just, you see someone on a motorcycle and they think they're cool, but like a helicopter would be so much cooler.
A helicopter is cooler. I mean,
Yes,
anyone can buy a motorcycle essentially. Uh,
exactly, exactly.
Not everyone can buy a helicopter. Um, they next part of the show had at one point had a group punishment. And most things at selection and military courses are group punishment. So you do get penalized if you personally mess up, but a lot of times it is exacted on the entire group. So one person messes up, the whole group will get in trouble. And the logic behind that is just they want to build teams, not a bunch of individuals operating out for themselves. They want to build teams. Even if you have a weaker person, they want to make sure that you're grabbing the weaker person and bringing them up to their level, or maybe someone who's maybe less competent. You want to try to bring everyone up. You don't want to create a unit where it's like, well, every man is for himself. And, if someone's a little bit slower or having a bad day, that's his problem. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I also like that they had a punishment for someone that had trouble with without spoiling anything, keeping their gear in check, and how that person was punished, even though the punishment, which involved burpees, not good burpees. As someone a fair share of burpees in my time, I don't think his chest hit the ground once.
yeah, the punishment for not having your gear in check is fairly common. At Ranger School, you have all of your like extra equipment is literally tied to you. Like, so when you stop at the end of like a mission, they check make sure you have all your equipment. And people have 550 cord tangled up into balls. It is a complete disaster.
I think I remember you telling me a story too of like a friend that like misplaced their rifle and like how, that's a no-no for sure.
That is 100% a no-no. I mean, you'll get dropped from the course, and if let's say they lose the rifle, they actually like it's not just like, oh, I left it over by the tree. Let's say you're like, I don't know where my rifle is. I mean, we will stop training. You will line up like arm to arm, and you will walk through the field or the whatever the river, wherever you are, trying to find it, right? Because that's a sensitive item. It's a serial numbered item. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. I also don't know if you guys talked about it too much. I know I listened to the other episodes, but I liked seeing the like immediate positive reinforcement. They're tough on the contestants, but like when they made it to the top of the helicopter, they're like, they congratulated them. They said they're proud of them, and then like right back to the grind. And I
Yeah.
like that moment of like relief. Did you guys have that, or were they just kind of stern faced the entire time for your training?
So mostly stern face the entire time. At
That's what I figured.
special forces specifically, you actually get very little feedback, so you don't get positive or negative. They'll just be like, okay. and they
Right.
write a bunch of notes down, and then you just go off and you're like, was that good or was that bad? So if you have a nice instructor, occasionally he'll give you some positive feedback, but a lot of times it's no feedback and it drives people crazy. They don't like it.
No, that makes sense. And I know that there was also a contestant that um, needed some feedback. They kind of pulled him aside and gave him a little pep talk, which helped him perk up. And I don't imagine that they would do that for you guys either.
No, typically a pep talk would come, and we saw it on the show. It would come from within the team, right? So if you needed someone to give you a pep talk, it would probably come from within someone on your team. And there's not that much of that unless it's something like really bad, and it's like, all right, this is my friend who I've been friends with the whole time, and something happened that maybe it was not necessarily his fault, and then you kind of reach out to him. But
I
yeah,
think the scariest thing for me in this episode was the anaphylactic shock that I saw because I am at risk of that with shellfish. Uh,
yeah.
that's got to be like a horrible, because I know you talked about how people medically uh, DQ, but like they really could have pushed on this guy, not so much.
Yeah, so this is the first, I wrote down in my notes, first legit medical pull. That's what I wrote down in my notes for this one. So I don't believe any of the other people actually got medical dropped. For the
Okay.
anaphylactic one, I would say yes, that's probably a legitimate drop.
Yeah. And I also, this was the first episode that I saw. I wasn't sure how far they were going to push this mental test. So there was a part when like the other contestants were asking like, where was the other where's the other guy? I thought that they were going to lie and say that like he died or something. I really thought that like, the tone of the show and everything. I'm like, oh, they're really going to like mentally try to break these people immediately, but it wasn't that crazy.
Yeah. What did you think of at one point they had them write essentially their death letters. What did you think of that?
I love that. I know that I did something like that back in the summer program that I did, and it really makes you uh, take a step back and appreciate the small things that you kind of take for granted. It's very easy to do that. Life is busy, and you don't really think about siblings, your parents,
Yeah.
grandparents, aunts and uncles. And I like that they had to read them in front of each other and how they were uncomfortable with that. But that just goes to show how from the heart it was, and I thought that was interesting. Did you guys probably didn't have to do anything like that, right?
No, so a couple of interesting things. So one, this is the one time I'll admit I'll be like, all right, this would be really emotional if you had to do this in front of a group of people
Yeah.
because again, you're sharing some very personal stuff.
Mhm.
So I wrote again, not mandatory, but I wrote death letters before my first two deployments because I wasn't sure. I don't know what I'm getting into, right? And I'm like, well, probably should do something. And I wrote a bunch of letters and I saved them on a zip file. And I told one person, one of my good friends, where they were. I was like, hey, just in case something happens, this is the folder I want you to look in. Here's what it on my computer. And obviously, we never needed that, so that was good. Positive there, positive there. But they do make you take. That's my cat or my parents' cat coming over here. They do make you take a photo. So a lot of the photos you see when someone dies, a lot of times before deployment, you take like a photo in your dress uniform. My
Okay.
favorite thing about that photo is like my photo before my deployments with SF. I actually have no pants on in the picture because it's only from like mid chest up, and you're like, I don't need to change my pants too. So like everyone is in like their underwear or like ranger panties or like mismatching pants. So it actually looks ridiculous, like from afar as the picture's being taken.
Hey, I
Um,
get it. I worked from home for a little bit in 2020, and I get that.
it's a good point. Yeah, we used to do back in 2014. We used to have we're on deployment to Qatar, and we had two conference rooms. One of them we'd call the no pants conference room because the desk covered your waist, and the other one was the pants conference room because you could see your legs.
Nice.
Yeah,
And
but
then
in
I
in
also real quick on
yep.
that too. I also liked how it was a good reminder to the people watching the show of like, yes, this is entertaining, but this does simulate the training that people go through in order to put their lives on the line. So I thought that was like a good reminder to like the viewers of like,
Yeah.
hey, this is serious.
Yeah, and at SFAS or at selection, we did have to do a lot of at the beginning. I mean, the course is largely physical, but at the beginning there was a lot of mental stuff. So we had to take, a bunch of psychological exams, and then we had to answer a bunch of long form, essentially essays at the beginning of the course to show you can communicate effectively in written form and think through problems if you have a little bit more time to like sit down and actually think of a solution. So there was a bunch of scenarios that we had, and they would give us something there where there's really no right answer, and you kind of have to figure out a plan based off of your personal experience and what tools you think you have available, and you just kind of write an essay. We did that a couple different points at the beginning.
Nice. Yeah, I think
So,
that's important.
yeah. All right, we're gonna jump into episode 9. Anything else you want to cover at episode 8 that I jumped over? Like,
Uh, no, I think I got that's all the notes I had for that one.
okay, cool. So episode 9, we jump into parts that are a little more like Navy SEAL, or Navy SEAL buds, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, or combat dive qualification course. So it was a lot of swimming related stuff. So at one point they had him do a weighted swim, and I'll say, as someone who's done weighted swims, it is surprisingly very hard. And what's crazy about it is, right? So the weight's pulling you down, and your immediate reaction is, well, I got to get my head above water. Except obviously you breathe from your mouth and your nose, not from the back and sides of your head. So the
Right.
more of your head you pull up above the water, the more it forces you under the water. So you need to get comfortable, just like if you were swimming, right, with just bringing your mouth or nose out of the water. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, it's not intuitive. You have to, and once you see it and kind of think about it, you're like, well, obviously that makes sense. But the more you kind of stick your head up, you more you go upright, and the more you're upright, the more you start sinking. So,
Right.
um, they also did drown proofing, where they kind of like tie your hands and feet together and you bob. Any
Yep.
thoughts on that, Mike?
So it sounds really messed up, but I've always wanted to try this. Obviously in a more controlled environment like that. I'm not gonna be doing it in the backyard of my grandparents or something like that. But I think it's fascinating. Ever since I saw the show The Selection, which had some like old school OCR athletes on it.
Yeah,
I just thought it was like the coolest thing of like kind of playing with life and death and like that's real mastery of holding your breath, body awareness, and gives you a whole new perspective on life when you're able to go through it. So I thought that was very interesting to watch.
yeah. So I'd say I've also done that before. It is hard at first, and it looks a lot scarier than it is. Once you kind of get the hang of it, it actually becomes, it's almost like deep meditative breathing, right? Because you kind of get into a rhythm, and
Yes, yeah,
you just kind of flow. And it actually, when we were training for dive school, when they'd be like, "We're going to practice drown proofing right now," you'd be like, "Yes," because no one's yelling at you, no one's bothering you. You're just kind of like these deep, relaxing breaths in the pool, going up and down. So it actually hard at first, but then gets easy fairly quickly once you get comfortable in the water. And it can be a lot harder if you just do another exercise beforehand, right after you do the weighted swim, or they have you swim like at
right.
dive school. They have you bob for a while, and then I think you do a front flip underwater, bob, back flip underwater, bob, and then I think you actually like go around the pool with your hands and feet tied, and then bob some more.
Okay, so there's some like exertion, and you are trying to catch your breath while you're doing that. That's
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's not too bad once you get down and get the hang of it. It's definitely one of the easier events at
yeah.
the course.
You use the word rhythm, which the contestants use too, and that definitely seems to be the case of like, just bend your knees, and once you get to the bottom, shoot back up, catch your breath. I do have a question though. I noticed that they were all exhaling through their nose. Wouldn't it be easier to exhale through your mouth and like release everything quicker, or you're not allowed to do that?
No, you're allowed to do that. I didn't notice that. I feel like I usually exhale through my mouth.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, so the trick is you got to exhale enough where you lose enough buoyancy where you start sinking, right? Because if I hold all my breath, I'm just going to kind of stay near the surface. And if I blow all of my air out, I'm going to drop super fast, but then I don't have any oxygen left in my body. So you blow like half to three quarters out and then kind of repeat.
It's
And
almost
then
like
you,
a trust fall.
yeah, kind of
Yeah.
with yourself, I guess. I don't know. So, let's see. I'm looking through my notes, and I don't not quite remember exactly what I wrote here. I wrote appreciate the quotes. I have no idea what that means. Does that
Uh,
ring any?
the quotes, no, but I do know that I just had to say something, and this might be a spoiler. I did not see that mass murder story coming at all.
The mass murder story. I don't even remember that part.
So the best contestant in the whole show, I thought from the very beginning, I really liked her. And she goes in and she's like, yeah, I always, I never felt like safe and this and that. And she just talked about how her family was like murdered it was like this crazy, crazy story, and I'm like, oh my God, this is some real trauma, not like, celebrity,
Yeah, it's like real trauma. Like you need to go
real
psych
trauma.
it's deep psychological counseling for this.
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere, and even the cadre or whatever were like taken aback, like, oh, there's no way you see that story coming. So I thought that definitely stuck out.
Yeah. Interesting. I think we're up to the point. Is this the one where they start getting captured?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So for capture for in the military, you get trained prior. So before we actually go through like the actual capture portion of our training, they give us training and we do like mini rehearsals and mini practice ones. So you kind of know what the standard is. Versus in this show, they just kind of like capture them. They're like, well, just kind of figure it out. And it's like, well, uh, I don't know. Like then you don't know what standard you're going against. You're just kind of using your own personal judgment, which
Right.
in some aspects is a little bit harder. Um, However, in the military courses, just because you are doing the right thing doesn't necessarily mean they will treat you well. Even if you're doing everything correctly, sometimes they still treat you pretty poorly. Um, a
Yeah.
lot of the military, to me, the hardest part of deployments or military training is the fear of the unknown. And I put a quote here. It says, "Unknown will always get you," basically saying that it's scary, right? If you don't know what you're getting into, it becomes a lot harder. And the more information you have on something, the easier it will be to actually come and face.
Yeah, that makes sense because like the unknown is limitless. Like, kids that are scared of the dark, there could be
Correct.
absolutely anything you could possibly imagine out there. And same thing for the military. Like, it could be squirrel, it could be a drone, I can't imagine being in that situation.
Yeah. And I mean, you nailed it too. Your mind will go nuts.
Yeah.
Your mind will not go nuts thinking of possibilities, right? It just, yeah, the imagination will just take over. And a lot of times, I had a friend before we go to Ranger School. It's early in your career. It's a major career point for early officers. And one of my friends before we went, he goes, if Ranger School was as hard as people think it is, he's like, no one would ever pass. He's like,
Mm.
an average day is, you can do one day of Ranger School and you'd be like, I am tired, but that was not too bad.
Yeah.
It's the back-to-back days and it's
That's why I'm
stretched out over 2 months and the accumulated stress and the lack of sleep and the lack, like when you start piling all those things on, it becomes a very painful school, but it's still not as bad as people imagine just because in your mind you have this just impossibly hard thing.
Yeah. Something that I took issue here, and I don't exactly remember what part this was about, but I wrote, weird that they suddenly changed from do what we tell you to wanting them to initiate. So they made comments about them being submissive, but that's
Yeah,
exactly what the training that I saw has made them into. So I'm all about like behavior, like my job is all behavior.
that's a good point.
So I just thought that was very interesting that they're like, they train them in this certain way, and they're like, well, why aren't they, initiating? It's like, well, because you train them to listen to the word. That I found that very frustrating, and that comes back full circle later when I had even bigger issues with that in the last episode. But yeah,
Okay.
definitely pointed that out.
That's a really good point. No, yeah, very good point. Um, yeah, because they'll behave. You're doing conditioning. You're conditioning
Yes,
people is what you're doing.
absolutely.
Um, I did want to comment. The base looks that's what a base in like Iraq or Afghanistan would look like. The
Okay.
tents are very similar. The containers, like the HESCO barriers, the building that are kind of like not. It's pretty austere. So I thought that was pretty kind of interesting that it was fairly accurate. And I mean, it was filmed in Jordan, which does butt up against other Middle Eastern countries that we do deployments to, and we do deployments to Jordan as well. So I guess not super surprising, but
I mean,
if you're wondering what a base overseas looks like, it kind of looks like that, but significantly bigger. It's a little bit small for a base. Um, they did have them memorize a story as part of their mission, um, like memorizing large amounts of facts to kind of give them their backstory on why they were doing stuff, and that's pretty accurate. We do that for a lot of our missions. We have a story that we're supposed to stick to. I found that the easiest way for me to memorize large amounts of facts is I draw pictures. So I will draw, if I have to memorize a bunch of facts, I will essentially draw a picture of what the facts I have to memorize. and that allows me to consume the information easier because I can recall the picture in my mind and link the words to whatever I specifically drew. And it's not like a super detailed picture. Like I'm not an artist. It's like stick figures and boxes and like arrows and stuff like that. That helps me remember.
That's pretty cool. I recently saw something that it kind of broke down, remembering like the standard like measurement system. So like remembering quarts and gallons and this and that. But the cover story training thing, it blew my mind. It's not something that I had ever thought of. Like I did think about like what happens when you're captured. I just figured like deny, 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 but I never thought about like offering a replacement.
Plausible solution, yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought that was very interesting. I never thought about that. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, and if you're doing it well, there's evidence, right? So if I say I was doing X, Y, or Z, I have evidence of myself doing X, Y, or Z. It's a
Yeah.
picture, receipts from something, or I have equipment that's yeah, if I say I'm there to do medical training, right? Like I have a book about medical training with me. I've got extra medical supplies, etc. Like you have props and stuff to help back up what you say you're doing. Um,
Yeah, and I like that they really aimed for the specifics. Like, okay, you're out there for, this kind of wolf. What size is the wolf?
right, yeah.
Who is your escort person? Who is this? Who is that? Like they had to know their information, and that was very cool.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people will falter. They'll only go one layer deep. You have to be prepared to go several layers deep, and basically as deep as until someone gets tired of asking questions. That's how deep you have to be able to go. You know,
Yeah,
criminals use this stuff all the time, right?
right.
People will be on the corner selling cigarettes or something, and the cops are like harassing them, and it's like, well, why are the cops harassing them? And it's like, well, when I sell loose cigarettes, that's the same thing I would use to sell drugs, right? It's the same exact behaviors, except, in one pocket is my drugs and the other pocket is my loose cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of like, yeah, that's how criminals kind of toe that line. So
On a much, much, much lesser level, I have been doing something like that where I would, try to get approved for a fire permit so I can burn all the yard work and stuff that I'm doing in the back. They would never respond. So I would burn everything, and then if the fire department or police ever showed up, I would just have hot dogs out there and be like, "Oh, I'm grilling. I'm cooking."
nail it, man. That's perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect. That's great application. I love it. I
Small
love
scale criminal.
it. Yeah, they at one point they woke them up with an artillery simulator. That is fairly accurate. I've been woken up numerous times by artillery simulators. It's just a loud bang. It gets you awake really quickly and startles you out of bed.
I bet.
Um,
The
uh,
preview for episode 10 had me so excited. Like I was like, all right, I'm going through this. But the way that they ramped up and kind of you know showed how things were potentially coming to fruition, that's when I got really excited and into the show.
um, so I did notice that to me, it looked like they were getting enough sleep, right? Because if you don't have enough sleep, you get this like droning face. I mean, you've seen it at World's Toughest Mudder. The guys who've been up, at the 20-hour mark, that's the face people look like
Or
when they,
Katie Knight drunk, like punch drunk.
yeah,
Yeah.
you get that at military training. And I didn't really see that with a lot of them. So I suspect they were getting a fair amount of sleep
Yeah.
for their TV show training thing. They did do blind drop-offs where they essentially kick them off someplace and they don't really know where they are. So in training, we do that happens, right? Like sometimes they will kick us out of a vehicle or infiltration platform. In combat, I always make sure, right? If I'm flying on a helicopter, I do trust the helicopter pilots to drop us off in the right place, but I'm also double checking, right? Because the last thing I want to do is I get off and I start running in the wrong direction or we're one grid square over from where I need to be. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of something you double check on the way. So at this point, I believe they're captured and they are starting to get chased. That is very much like seer training. We did get pursued by dogs and people. Um, let's see what else here. Any thoughts on some of the pursuing at the end of episode 9?
I thought it was really interesting. I wouldn't have thought so much about like staying close to like obviously you don't want to be on a like open field, but like how important it is to kind of stay close to outcropping of rocks and everything when you're being pursued. And sometimes it is better to just like sit and wait and hope that they don't see you than like run away. Because if you run away, like they see you, and with dogs, they will catch you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, really a lot of stuff is really situation dependent.
Yeah.
Um, the cadre had infrared so they could see a lot further than the students. So you kind of have to be careful and, pay attention to your movement and see what else. Um, and for a lot of our training exercise, we do a lot of night movements. During one of we have this big infiltration mission for like the final of Special Forces qualification course, and our backpacks were like 120 pounds. It's not an exaggeration. We actually weighed them. The backpacks were 120 pounds, and then that doesn't count your water carrier and doesn't count your weapon. So you're just carrying so much weight. It was stupid. Like you essentially had to sit down and put your backpack on, and then you'd have to roll onto all fours and then stand up. And the weight of the backpack was so heavy, like you were having trouble breathing because it was pressing on your lungs. Um, so just the time under backpack hurt. So what we were doing is our guide would kept being like, "Hey, do you want to stop? Do you want to take a rest?" And I'd be like, "No, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going." And like every second or third time he'd ask me, we take a rest. But I was like, the issue is time under load. It's not necessarily the pace we're moving. It's just like this backpack is literally crushing us. And while we're doing that, essentially I didn't realize it, but we were moving too fast for the time hack we needed for the actual training.
Oh,
So at
wow.
one point they're like, all right, one of our local guides, I'm using air quotes here, suddenly fell down and hurt himself, also using air quotes. And so they're like, oh, this 230-pound man is hurt. Now we need to carry a 230-pound man in addition to our backpacks, in addition to all our equipment. And I remember calling my medic up and being like, "Hey, our guide hurt himself." And my medic comes up and evaluates him, and then he leans over to me. He's like, "Sir, I don't think he actually has any injury." And I was like, "I know he doesn't have any injury. It's part of the game, you idiot." Like so angry. And he's like, "Oh." It's like, anyway, long story short, we had to carry this dude. Like we'd carry him for 50 feet, go back, pick up our backpacks, carry those for 100 feet, go back, pick up the guy, carry him for 100 feet. And we had to play like a leapfrog. It was painfully slow.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to remember that next time I'm looking at my rucksack now. It's only 30 pounds. I can't imagine that much more
It's
weight.
so stupid. It's like it can't be good for your back. It can't be good for anything. But I'm glad I had the experience again because it just proves that it can be done. It's not something I need to go reevaluate and redo every year, right? I got it. Yeah. All right, let's jump into episode 10. Anything else you wanted to add for episode 9 before we close that one out?
Nope, that's it.
All right, so episode 10. Again, if you watch the TV show The Selection, some of the stuff may seem familiar. It's inspired by Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Invasion, the military course where they pretend you're a prisoner of war. If you've seen the movie G.I. Jane, which I kept using I was speaking at high schools this week, telling them about my experience in the military and obstacle course racing, and I kept referencing G.I. Jane, and no one had seen it, and I was like, "Oh, that's right, I'm old," and that movie's from like the 90s. So
I'm sorry. I have also not seen it. The only thing that I know about it is wasn't that the joke that Chris Rock made to Will Smith when Will Smith slapped him?
yeah, I think it was. It's actually a really good movie. It's about it's about Demi Moore going into the SEAL program, and
Oh,
people are like, "Oh, is it based on a true story?" And no, it's not based on a true story. This film came out 20 years before females were allowed to go to SEAL training.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, but like the action scenes and the scenes at Buds are like, to me, it's good cinema for like military training, and the scenes at SEER are super interesting because what I thought was funny was like the scenes that look very Hollywood in the movie are actually more realistic, and the scenes that look realistic in the movie are actually more Hollywood, right? Because
Huh.
there's
Yeah.
certain things that have to happen at SEER training, right? You have to get captured. If you
Right.
don't get captured, you don't get to complete the training, right? So like they essentially force you to get captured. It's not like it's less of a game um, than I think some people think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, There was let's see what else we got here. With the number of students left, there in some respects it does make as like celebrities as part of a TV show a little bit harder because the instructors can deep dive a little bit further versus when we're going through a lot of that training, there's a lot more people, so they have less time to focus on each individual person. The thing that makes it a little bit harder for on our side is ours is multiple days long. It's not only like 24 hours essentially, and um, they are more violent and they can add more stress. So it is painful. It's painful to be a seer. So
Yeah, I did love that they, told the interrogators that the, individual participants' weaknesses, because as you said, like they could really key in on each and every one of them, and it was effective.
and I think at one point they had one of the people like stripped down to their underwear, didn't they?
Yes, yeah, that sort of like really show them like you are not in control right now, and yeah, they were kind of one. You can never really tell like the way that they filmed it, but one of the contestants seemed like really, know, like took a couple seconds to be like, really? Yep.
Yeah. So I spent you do that is accurate. I'll say that. I'll say that. I'm I've done yard work with very little clothing on. I'll just say that. I'll leave it at that statement.
We're just talking about the military here, Evan, not
Not just around.
not your day to day.
Yeah, so that is accurate. And again, it shows, like you said, you nailed it. Again, it shows that they're not in control. It makes you feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
My way to deal with that, it was I always just don't look down. I'm like, well, if I don't look down, I'm not naked. So that's the way it is.
Yeah.
I just That's my technique to get around it. Give me some of your other thoughts about the final episode here. So I'm not going to say too much about the techniques the prisoners themselves are using, just because it starts getting into classification issues and like what I'm allowed to say or not allowed to say.
Fair. So it definitely brought up the whole thing, the word gets, the phrase gets tossed around like Geneva Conventions, this and that. I don't exactly know what that is. Was it just like, is it agreed upon, like, these are the things that we won't do?
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. It's a bunch of countries that came together and said in Geneva, and they said this is what we can and can't do to prisoners and the way they should be treated, essentially.
Okay, that's what I figured. It also was very interesting to me. Umpire, is that a term that's used in the military?
No, we don't use that. That's not we don't use that term now.
Okay. And why the holy hell, and this isn't really too much of a spoiler, why didn't it show his face? Do you think he was like active duty? I think it said it, but I don't recall why they kept it was like very mysterious.
Yeah, I think he's either active duty or he's a contractor that works in the schoolhouse of one of these programs. Right? So he can't divulge his, exactly who he is because then he theoretically could be targeted or etc. So probably a good call. It may also have been done to add to the drama, but it's probably legitimately a good idea to probably keep his face hidden.
Okay, that makes sense. And
With a lot of that stuff, I think of when I was in Iraq, what I would have done to find some of the bad people. So I understand the trepidation or the concern with kind of sometimes exposing your links and some of your background. So
right.
yeah.
Okay. And then, you can't really talk about like what you went through, but like how difficult was it to learn how to deal with interrogation like in your training?
They like I said, they give you a lot of reps ahead of time. And it's hard. It is hard because there's no like right answer. There's some
Yeah.
like suggested techniques, and you have a bunch of techniques to choose from. And what also makes it hard is the instructors. Just because you do the right technique, it doesn't mean the instructor's going to be like, "Great job, let's
Right.
get you out of here." Like they'll just keep pressing on you. So you're like, "Should I switch to a different technique? Should I keep with this one?" So sometimes it's a little bit challenging. But they did, unlike the show, they did give us training ahead of time. Versus like in the show, it just kind of felt like they threw him in. And then at one point, again, I'm not going to tell you who it was, but at one point they dropped someone, and I thought it was really weird.
Agreed.
Yeah, I just thought that was really like, if you're not giving him any training, like how is he supposed to know how he's supposed to behave? And to me, I didn't think that that person deserved to get dropped that late in the show.
I completely agreed as well. I know that I wrote down like one of the jokes that he wrote, that had to do with stilts, and I thought it was very funny. And there's that kind of there was some like disrespect, this and that, but like when you're not really told how to react, and then he changed tactics, and things got better, and then before they got worse again.
Right.
Um, and then I also found it very interesting, like the misdirection by one of the contestants of like, "Are you drinking coffee? Is it time for coffee?" Like relaxed type questions. I'm not guilty of anything. I have no worry, I have no reason to be nervous right now. I'm asking regular people questions, and I thought that was very interesting to see
Yeah.
with one of the contestants.
Yeah. That's good observations. Good observations.
I have a quick question for you.
Shoot.
What would be the worst sound that you would have to listen to for torture? So they played Baby Shark at World's Toughest Mudder, but that's my workday music. I work with kids. It does nothing to me.
Yeah.
Um, I think I have one for myself, but what would be one for you?
I, I don't know. It does. The sound stuff never really bothered me. Like I've had babies playing crying on repeat, and they have a bunch of songs that they like to play. Like they're very anti-war songs. I think a lot of them are from the Vietnam era,
Right.
that they would play on repeat at Sears School, and they're just kind of annoying. It's just the repeating sounds never really bothered me too much. I was so tired at some points that it was like, oh, cool. And I just went to sleep anyway, right? Or tried to go to sleep, or yeah,
Yeah. I remember hearing stories of some musical artists finding out that their songs were used for torture, and they got pretty angry about that. But for me, I think the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" because her voice just goes right through me, and I can't just imagine listening to that on repeat.
yeah, that's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. But yeah, with this type of process, the reason we do it again is it's the whole reason selection exists is because you need to have the physical capabilities, but you also need to have the psychological capability and the ability to deal with the unknown and the ability to deal with circumstances that you have sometimes have little or no control over. That's the reason they do a selection instead of just doing a physical fitness test, right? Because I mean, if I wanted to just do a physical fitness test, I would grab like the top people from World's Toughest Mudder and the top people from the Go Rec Games and be like, well, you're now soldiers because you are clearly the fittest of the group. But
Yeah.
it's a lot more than that. It's a lot teamwork and all the psychological stuff. So yeah, that's kind of why it exists. And the other thing I kind of wanted to share is that for this and for the TV show The Selection, at the end of it, it's like we did it, we made it. When you're actually in the qualification course, this was for me. They changed the order of things all the time, but this was after. Let's see, we did 6 months of language, we did 2 months of small unit tactics, then we did SEER. So a lot of the stuff you see was about 8 months into our training pipeline. And then it's like the weekend after we graduated SEER, I went back into a different training thing on Monday, right? Like I just jumped right back into it. It was the mission specialty portion. So I went back into I did a classroom a lot for the next phase, but it was 3 months. And then we also did field training and then another month of a final exercise. So it's just one more step of a 14-month training pipeline or 20-month or longer than that, 26-month if you're a medic. So
A lot, yeah. On the topic of not getting that good job and attaboy, I think I saw videos, and I don't know if this is actually what happens, but like when you get a pin or whatever, do they gently put it on your shirt and then smash it into your chest? Is that a real thing?
oh, blood wings. Yeah, that's a real thing. Yeah, you never heard of blood wings?
I
Oh,
no, I have. I didn't realize that's what they were called.
yeah, blood. So blood. It's typically with special forces you get a patch, and Ranger School you get a patch. So there's usually not blood patches, although you could jam a pin into someone. But blood wings in general, so it's usually at airborne school. That's typically where it's done most frequently. Sometimes it's done at air assault school. So when they put your pin on your chest, they will put it on without the backing, and then they punch it essentially. So the needles of the pin go into your chest.
Okay.
And it sounds worse than it is, right? Because your uniform's fairly thick, and depending on what pocket they put it on, a lot of times the pins don't actually go very deep into it leaves a mark, but it's not like bearskin blood wings, which would be terrible.
Okay, that's kind of how I always envisioned it. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's unusual.
And I'm sure there are places that do bearskin blood wings. I've never seen it done. I've seen it done, and I've had it done where it's through the uniform, and it's yeah, like that pinches. It
Yeah,
pinches just like getting a needle, right? But it's also not probably not very sanitary, I'm sure.
that's what I was thinking. But the thickness of the uniform definitely is
It definitely makes it a lot better. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, good question. Good question. All right, I think that kind of wraps up the TV show Special Forces. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was good. You know, what did you
Yeah,
think?
I liked it. I also noticed some like medical things. I recently just got, recertified with CPR. And it was kind of funny seeing them tap him on the shoulder and say like, "Are you okay?" Which is exactly how they showed it in the training. But I just wanted to harp on the whole ass backwardsness of the whole stay quiet and lie through everything, stick to your story, wait for backup. Oh wait, right before you think you're gonna die, tell them that you work for the military. Just like how are they supposed to know? I feel like the box thing could have been torture, like a threat. I feel like maybe if it was something more clear, like indicating death, like a fake gun or a fake guillotine or something, where they know like, oh, this is the end. This is where we really have to say something. Um, that bothered me, and then also like one contestant was in the box by themselves. Then the next time two contestants were in the box themselves and they got to communicate with each other. Like that also wasn't, you know, fair, I guess, if you want to really like assess each person, each person's ability.
Yeah. No,
So
yeah,
that bothered
there's
me a lot.
some I agree with some of those observations. It was kind of weird. And
Yeah.
I wonder how much was done off camera. Like, all right, now
Yeah.
when we open the box, just tell them, like, we're gonna do a bunch of close-ups of your face, and then here's what I want you to say. You
Yeah.
know,
That's a good
I
point.
I wonder how much of that. 'Cause me and Bobby were talking about that last time. How like more of the show is scripted than we think,
Yes.
um, and they make them redo shots to make sure they get the perfect angle and re-say things that make sure the right person's in the shot or that we get the right reaction. So
Yeah. I did like that for the um what is it? The people that were, interviewing and all that, like they weren't just the stereotypical people you would expect. There's one person that you wouldn't really expect to be intimidating, and that person was very intimidating. And I thought that was like really cool to show that it's not always size, it's just kind of how you carry yourself that's intimidating.
yeah, attitude, how you carry. Yeah, and there was some of the bigger people were not the worst people
Yeah.
that's here, and sometimes they were though. So it's yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it than just size or just appearance.
Yeah. And then seeing the flashbacks of like what the final contestants did to finally get them to where they got, it kind of made me interested to watch the rest of the episodes. I won't because I don't think I have the time for it, but the thought was there. So it seemed like a very entertaining show, and I liked how it ended.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, I watched it on the treadmill. That's why I primarily watched it. I was doing some off-season training and just I'd watch an episode for a run, and then next time I ran, I did a different episode, and that's how I worked my way through the season.
Yeah, that's how I am. I don't have a treadmill yet, but I have a elliptical that I got for free. Which
Nice.
that's how I watched all of the World's Toughest Mudder coverage since I missed it last year.
Yeah, but for a good reason. For a good
Yes.
reason.
Yes, of course.
So, speaking of your life and what's been going on, give us some updates from Obstacle Running Adventures, your
Yes.
podcast, and kind of what you've been doing, what you got going on, and what we have to look forward to.
We had probably the biggest guest that we've ever had on the show for our own episode. We had Des Linden on the show, winner of the
Legend.
Boston Marathon. Yeah, her agent reached out to us, which I thought was crazy because like we're not taking over the world with our show. But we got her book in advance, and she came on the show, which was awesome.
And that's
And
that's what you teased the last time you were on, wasn't it? Is it not?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I had the book I showed you when we weren't recording, and that was pretty big. But getting back to what the show's all about, obstacle course racing. There's the Savage 3K series, which is interesting, and then the Savage Point series, which I'm very interested in. So this weekend there's two big events happening. I'm hoping to have some podium people on for the next couple episodes, and just finding some more people in the OCR community and really enjoying the show. And yeah, staying weekly. It's it's tough, but we haven't missed an episode, and since we started in 2017, which is a long time ago now, I think.
That's a long time. You're a better man than I am. I can't handle that.
Or just misplaced priorities. I don't have.
Yeah, the 2 episodes a month even still feels like I still feel like I'm barely hanging on sometimes, but I've got a decent number built up for the next 2 months. I gotta go on vacation in July, so I'm trying to prepare ahead of time.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Um, Also wanted to point out that our ultra-ocr man documentary has officially dropped. It is, if you go to the teamstrengthspeed.com or ultra-ocrman.com website, you will see links to it everywhere. So plastered everywhere. It's $10 to order, and it's a 24-minute documentary. It's got a bunch of footage that you've never seen before, right? So it covers OCR World 21,000 feet, covers parts of OCR America 2, covers a bunch of interviews we did talking about like the psyche of ultra endurance obstacle course racing. Bobby Ross did a great job. Mike's in it. Mike's, any thoughts? Anything you want to add to the doc?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to see this months ago, and I did the most selfish thing imaginable. I watched it, and I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to see like how many times I'm in it, and I like tallied myself. I can't remember how many, but it was a lot, and I highly recommend it. Not only because I'm in it, but it's really well done. Everything Bobby Ross touches with his camera is just magic. So yeah, highly recommend it. I enjoyed it. I watched it twice already. So
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, again, I really recommend it. Obviously, also, if you want to see more content like that, please pick up a copy because if that does well, we will continue to produce digital content. If that does not do well, I will have a lot of trouble convincing Bobby to do anything digital again with me. So,
yeah, I mean, it's just like, supporting your local races. If you don't show up and you say you want something and then you don't show up to participate or purchase it, then it just how can it be supported? So, put
yeah,
your money where your mouth is and all that.
I agree. Yeah, it's been selling slower than I imagined it would. We're making sales, but it's not. I was expecting like a huge boom right up front, and it's been kind of like trickling in. It's like, all right, maybe people don't want high quality video content. So yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's like this is amazing stuff here. Why aren't you enjoying it? Yeah.
Right. And I thought for me, like I feel like, oh, the movie will definitely sell faster and better than the books because it requires less energy, less effort. You can just kind of pay and then you just kind of sit there.
Right.
And so far the books have been outselling the movies or the
Mhm.
movie. So we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see how it pans out I gotta give it some more time to get the word out, but I've had some really good support from some of the companies that are in it. Hammer Nutrition shared a bunch of stuff, and VJ Shoes should have a thing by the time this airs. They'll probably have a message that goes out. Mudgear sent out like a mass email, which is super helpful. So I appreciate them and all their support.
Nice. Yeah, I know we plan to mention it this week on Quick News to get more love to it too, because yeah, it's good stuff out there.
Cool. Appreciate it. And by you this week, it'll probably be like several weeks ago by the time I drop this one. I'm going to keep this one on my hip pocket for a minute. So
There you go.
anything else, Mikey, we got to share, highlight before we get going?
No, just thanks for having me on. And enjoyed the show, and yeah, if you are interested in more podcast content, we're doing a thing every week, and yeah, we love the feedback too. So message us if you want to have someone on in particular. Had some really good recommendations, looking to shine a light on some more smaller scale OCR because sport's going through some growing pains, and
It does feel like that.
yeah, it's we're doing what we can to shine a spotlight on community members, athletes, businesses, and all that. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy what we put out.
Yeah. Same. I feel like I'm getting bad. I feel like the longer I'm in the sport, the worse I'm getting about finding new upcoming people.
Yeah.
I maybe I'm just I'm lazy, but at least in the Midwest, I feel like there's not that as many like new up and comers as there used to be.
Right.
At least the races I've been to this year, the turnouts have been fairly low, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is like my second race or first race," and I was like, "Oh, like how many races have you done?" I've been like, "I've done a couple."
It's
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 like,
always refreshing to see that. So I talk about like supporting your local races, like volunteer and stuff too. There's a race by us that I always volunteer at, Boulder Dash. It's very, very small. They've been going since 2011, but every time I go, I hear, I see a first timer going over a wall and like crying that they're so excited that they were able to do something so physical. And to us, it's just like, yeah, it's a wall. But like seeing first timers do that, it's very refreshing, and it makes
it's nice,
reminds me where I came from in the sport.
nice. All right, do you want to tell us something people would be surprised to know about you? You got anything
Cool.
good? Anything juicy we can share?
I'm looking around the room. This time I was not prepared for it. I know last time I had something related to video games. What nerdy stuff am I into? Video games, OCR. That's kind of like my life. I just finished grad school, so
Boom.
that's exciting. Yeah,
Nice. All right.
and a few more, 100 supervision hours, and pass a big test, and I'll be a board certified behavioral analyst. But it's a long road to get there.
Nice. Consistency and baby steps, You know the
Yeah.
deal.
Yep.
You've been in this game for long enough. All right. Thanks again, Mike, for one, taking the time to come on, and two, dealing with my schedule because I shifted the schedule on us repeatedly. So I appreciate your flexibility. Again, head over listening to Obstacle Running Adventures if you want more obstacle course racing podcast content, especially if you're from the Northeast. Like, there's a lot of great local coverage of the events up there, in addition to some of the national coverage. So it's a good mix for anyone, regardless of your location in the United States. And then anyone can head over to teamstrengthspeed.com. Links for Ultra OCR Man documentaries up there. Leg Mitt, Small, Medium, Large, Extreme, and Light are on there. All my books are on there. As soon as I finish editing this last book, I will put that up on there. But I have not finished editing it yet. I haven't really started, but the book's done. I just got to edit everything.
You're a busy man.
Yes, as always. So, and yeah, more great stuff coming. Hannibal Race announced they're doing a race in July. First week in July 9th. Might go out for that. We'll see. In Lebanon. We'll see. And I also heard a rumor that Tough Mudder is doing a Infinity event in Saudi Arabia in 2024.
Wow. Ooh, okay. That's news to me. That's awesome.
So that is exciting. So I was nothing set in stone also in that yet, but kind of looking at my race calendar and just kind of maybe making some plans out. We'll see.
Yeah, see where the wind takes you.
See where the wind takes me. That's right. All right. Thanks again, Mike, for coming on. We'll catch all of you guys later.